Welcome to today's webinar. I'm thrilled to have you all here with us. My name is Caitlin, and I'm one of the new business managers here at This Is School, and I'll be your host for the session. We have an exciting speaker today, Claire Wilson, who has been a teacher of German, French, Spanish for 16 years and 12 years experience as a subject leader. She's currently a teacher development lead at a comprehensive school in the Midlands. She's passionate about all things teaching and learning. And Claire also works as an educational consultant, writer, speaker, and lecturer. And before we dive into the insights that she's going to share with us, let's cover a bit of housekeeping. So, first, to make sure that everyone has the best experience, your microphones will be automatically on mute and cameras turned off. So if you do have any questions or thoughts during the session, please feel free to drop them into the chat or in the Q&A box, and we will reserve some time at the end for Q&A as well. So keep those questions coming. To test it out now, if everyone wants to jump on the chat and tell us where you're logging in from, that would be great. If I was going to type on there, for example, I would say I'm Caitlin, originally from California, but living in Scotland now. And finally, for housekeeping, I want to let you know that we are recording today's session. So the recording will be shared with you all after the session so that you can revisit all the valuable insights that are shared today. So without further ado, let's get started with Claire's presentation. Claire, the virtual stage is yours.
That's lovely. And I'm assuming that we can see the slides. We're a quick house. Brilliant. Okay, thank you so much, Caitlin. Thank you, everyone. It's really, really lovely to be here. Thank you so much to This Is School, to Caitlin, Jessica, and George for inviting me to do this webinar. I'm really, really excited to be here. So thank you very much for giving up your precious time to listen to me this evening. Assuming it is evening, I've not checked the chat where everybody is from. I'm Claire Wilson. First and foremost, I am a mum. I have two young, very lively children who take up a lot of my time. But in addition to that, I am also a passionate teacher of languages. I do that part-time now. I find it fits in a little bit better with family life. But in addition, as Caitlin has already said, I do a bit of consultancy on the side as well, which I'm really enjoying. I have done some writing for BBC Bite Size and some webinars for companies such as organisations such as Association for Language Learning. And most recently, I'm really excited to have got some work with a local university as an associate lecturer in education. So yeah, lots and lots of different hats, and I absolutely love the variety of what I do. And yeah, 16 years in, still loving it. It is tough. I know it's tough. But hopefully in this webinar, I can give you a few ideas that are going to just sort of make life as a teacher a little bit easier. That's the plan. If you would like to contact me, I am on LinkedIn as Claire Wilson, but I probably use Instagram the most. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Instagram later on, but you can follow me at _Leo Languages if you don't already. Thank you. So, so this is all about low effort, high impact ideas, something that I share quite regularly on my Instagram. I call them quick wins. Quick Win Wednesday is when I tend to share them. I'd love to know in the chat if anybody has seen any of these or follows me on Instagram or who I chat to on Instagram, and whether anybody has tried any of these ideas out already. This is the first time that I have done a webinar on my quick wins. I tend to focus on sort of more skills or motivation in language teaching. So it's really great to actually have the opportunity to talk through my quick wins a little bit more detail. Sometimes when I share them on Instagram, I worry that they aren't very clear and it's quite hard to explain. So hopefully this gives the opportunity for me to explain them. And if I'm still not being clear with that, then you can ask a question and I can try and explain it a little bit better. If you haven't got involved in Teacher Instagram, I would really, really encourage you to do so. We have a hashtag called MFL Insta. And this is something that we started about 4 years ago in the depths of the pandemic. A lot of us teachers very much it was sort of UK. A lot of we're feeling kind of completely lost. You know, we'd lost our sort of support network in schools. We were suddenly taking teaching online, which was a new skill for us all. And a few of us kind of took to Instagram really and started chatting on there and created a really fantastic community where we just supported each other. We've shared ideas. And there's thousands and thousands of posts under the hashtag MFL Insta. So please do check that out if you haven't done so already. So where have the quick wins come from? So in my recent interview, actually, for my job as a lecturer, the interviewer said, so Claire, CPD is your hobby. And absolutely CPD is my hobby. And I'm not sure if that makes me really sad, but I'm hoping that I'm in good company here, given that you're all sort of spending your free time doing some CPD. And I had, when I started teaching my PGCE, my teacher training 16 years ago, I had this little notebook here, which you can sort of see, sorry, I whizzed on a bit, you can see under there. And in that notebook, I wrote every single idea that I observed in lessons, that I learned at university, that I've picked up from discussions with teachers, from other training courses that I've been on. And I think that's why I've just got so many, well, I think so many ideas and things that I love to try out in the classroom. So, you know, please do keep hold of all of these ideas, because you never know when you're going to need them. So another reason I think that I'm quite kind of, I've got quite a repertoire of these ideas, because my very first classroom 16 years ago was fairly basic, and I'm not going to complain because I've never really had my own classroom since. So it was wonderful to have a classroom, but I think being the newcomer in that school as a newly qualified teacher, I was usually given the classroom with no proper, I mean, I don't want to call it an overhead projector, because in my head, the picture on the screen is an overhead projector, but you couldn't sort of beam your PowerPoints over or anything like that. So in my first year of teaching, I literally had an old wheeled in overhead projector that you put the vinyls on with the, you know, the pens. I had textbooks and I had a whiteboard and a pen and nothing else. So technology wasn't really something that I started using until a little bit later in my career. So I feel that I've become quite confident at just teaching with a pen, really, and I guess responding to the needs of the students, kind of where I need to. I don't always feel that I need to rely massively on technology, although I do like technology and use it a lot now. I feel like I've built up a repertoire and I built up confidence to be able to just kind of stop the lesson and be like, do you know what? This isn't working. I'm going to grab my pen. Let's go to the whiteboard. Let's just pick this apart. Let's have a rethink of how we do this. And I think, I may be wrong in thinking this, but I know that nowadays lots of schools have lots of pre-planned lessons. I think teachers understandably rely very heavily on the technology. And I just believe that it's a really good idea to get confident just with a pen and a whiteboard and a few ideas in your head that you can just pull out of the bag when you need them. And, you know, a lot of them are games, a lot of them are things that you can just write up on the board that you don't need to pre-plan, but that can just help you in your hour of need. If the technology has failed, if you had planned this wonderful lesson and the students just are not, it's just not happening, they're just not in the mood, maybe it's windy outside, and anybody who has been teaching knows that the wind, that, you know, can cause lots of problems, the weather can cause lots of problems. So it's just having these little ideas that you can pull out when you need them. By no means am I saying, you know, these should be replacing a very detailed planned lesson, not at all, but I think they're just very useful to have just there for when we need them, really. I'm really passionate about responsive teaching. I don't know if anybody follows Peps McRae on X, formerly Twitter. I've signed up to his, he does some really great research bites. So if you're interested in research-based practice, he sends some really great research ideas, well, you know, sort of tips from research that he sends to your email every Thursday. And they're really, really useful and really easy to understand. But he quoted, I believe, Dylan William, and said that responsive teaching entails adjusting our approach to meet the needs of our students regularly throughout the learning process. The more we make small course corrections as we go, the more efficiently we help our students get from A to B. Now, again, by no means do I think that these ideas are going to help massively with this, but I do feel sometimes, when we've got a class in front of us and lots of blank faces, we've checked for understanding, it's not there, we need to do more practice, we maybe need to bring some competition in, we're not ready to move on, we need to do something else. You do have to have some things in your armory just to be able to pull out when you need them. So, there is an element of responding to the needs of the students, I think, when you use some of these ideas. So hopefully that makes sense so far. So my first quick win, if you like, is, as I've already said to you, keep that notebook of every single idea that you come across. So I do a lot on my iPad now. I keep notes on my iPad at any CPD course that I go to or any webinar that I watch. I'm a big sort of fan of Apple, so I have a really good cloud-based system whereby my phone and my iPad and my computer all talk to one another. So if I see an idea as I'm scrolling through Instagram, I can just screenshot it and I save it straight onto my files. And it's been great because when I'm in school, if I need something very last minute, I've got it on my phone and I can just email it to myself at work, and it's just where I need it to be. So, I really would recommend, if you haven't got a good organization system, however you want to do that, but certainly with teaching ideas and resources, find a way of keeping them organized, because I'm not actually a very organized person at all, but when it comes to my sort of the technology and the resources and the ideas, I've got everything that I need and I can just simply search for them and I've got them. So I'm going to go straight in now with the different ideas. Many of them are games. I really do hope that I'm clear with the explanation. Please do ask if I'm not. And they're not in any kind of order. I've just basically thrown all of the different ideas all together. Normally there is a little bit more of a process with my webinars or speeches that I do. But with this one, I just thought, I'm just going to throw loads and loads of ideas at you. So apologies if it's a little bit overwhelming. They're not all my ideas. I am the biggest magpie. As I said, I steal lots of ideas and write lots of ideas from colleagues. Hopefully I've credited where credit is due, but if I haven't, please do let me know. And I'm sure that they're not brand new ideas for you. I'm sure they're things that you have come across before, but hopefully it's just a good reminder. I know even just making this webinar myself, I've been like, oh, I've not done that one for a while. I need to try that one again when I go back after Easter. So hopefully there are some takeaways, and I'd be really interested at the end to know which ones you're going to take away and try out in your classroom. So I'm going to start off with a vocab recall activity, vocab tennis. Again, not massively original. I'm sure this is something that you have done before, maybe something that you've not done for a while. This can be done either in spoken form or it can be done in written form. So the idea is that you give students a topic and a time limit, and they have to bat the target language words on that topic back and forth until one of them hesitates. So I always say to them, assume that you are playing a proper game of tennis. If that person has left it so long that that ball's going to bounce twice, then you get the point for it. So you may give them the topic of sport, for example, in French, German, Spanish, Italian, whatever, and they might start with basketball, football, golf, tennis. Oh, bit of hesitation. Okay, the ball's bounced twice. That student's going to get the point. So it's quite good at getting them to try to think of the vocabulary that you've been recently practicing. You can also do this as a written activity, so on a whiteboard or on the table or a piece of paper. And during COVID, I even got students doing this via text, so texting each other and then screenshotting me and emailing me over. A slightly more challenging variation on this is that students have to reply with a word starting with the last letter of the previous word. I think this is probably a bit difficult to do spoken, but I think for written, you may want to allow a little bit more time for this. This worked well, obviously, via text where they had a little bit more time, but it's a bit more challenging maybe for more advanced learners. Okay, one of my most popular quick wins, one that I have spoken about quite a lot. So if you have heard me speak before, you will be sick of me talking about this game because I absolutely love it. Again, not my idea, but unfortunately I've used it for so many years of teaching that I honestly don't even remember where I got it from. So if anybody, I can't even credit anybody with it, I'm afraid. But it's always been one of my most popular quick wins. It gets all students involved. And the way that this works is you put up a question or a sentence to translate. And again, this can be pre-planned if you do prefer to have things pre-planned, and I do sometimes. I'll have it as part of my lesson PowerPoint, or sometimes if I feel that my lesson's falling a bit short, or I want to kind of pick up the pace a little bit, sometimes I just come up with it as I go in the lesson and on the spot. So you put up that question or you say the sentence to students, and if they know the answer, brilliant, they just put their hand up. It's a really nice and easy one for them. However, if a student is unsure of the answer or absolutely doesn't know the answer, they can still put their hand up and bluff. What will then happen is I will choose a student with their hand up to translate, and if they get it right, all students with their hands up get a point. So it's worth it for those students that are a little bit unsure to put their hand up anyway, because hopefully they won't get picked and they're going to get a point anyway. However, if they get chosen and they get it wrong, that student loses all of their points and nobody else gets a point either. So the other students with their hands up don't lose their points. Only the student that you have asked who doesn't know the answer loses their points. And we have quite a laugh about this because I always say to them, it's all about your poker face. If you're doing this and hesitating and looking really unsure, I'm going to pick on you because I know you don't know the answer. So you've got to be really confident, put your hand up, and then you've got to try to trick me so that I'm not going to ask you. I find that even lesser confident students can't help but get involved in this. However, you obviously know your classes and you know your students, and I definitely wouldn't ask a student who was a little bit more anxious. If they got their hand up, I would just be really chuffed that they were getting involved, and I wouldn't probably ask them for fear of them getting it wrong and losing their points and them never wanting to put their hand up again. So it's one of those where, just exercise a little bit of caution there. You know your students. We usually get to a stage, we've got quite a good relationship, in the class, and we can have really good fun with it. But it's great, gets loads involved, it's a great way to practice questions and answers or translations that you've been working on. I do feel this is one that is much easier to see in real life. So I hope that I've explained that. If you do want me to go over it again, then please do let me know. Another vocab recall is pointless. So if you are UK based, you may know this game show called Pointless. It's fairly obvious. It does what it says on the tin. The idea is that students need to get as few points as possible. So again, pick a topic. Students are in pairs or in small groups. Set a time limit. It doesn't need to be very long, maybe 2 minutes. And you get students to write down 5 words, any 5 words that they can come up with in their pairs or groups on their mini whiteboard on that specific topic. And then the teacher will have their own whiteboard and do the same. So I always try to think of the most obvious words. So if I said to them the topic of food, I would probably write down in German because I'm passionate Germanist. So sorry, lots of my ideas will be based on German. I would probably write down Apfel, apple, Schokolade, pommes, chips, and I don't know, something, pizza, probably something really obvious that I know they're always going to come up with. And what happens is once the time's finished, students show their words. If they have any word the same as any other student in the class or any other group in the class, they get 2 points on their whiteboard. If they get the same as me, then they get 5 points. And the winning team, so you can play a few rounds of this with different topics if you want to, and the winning team is the team to have the fewest points. So the idea is it really encourages students to think outside of the box with vocabulary and come up with more unique items of vocabulary. So I know that students are going to come up with things like pommes and Schokolade because it's what they come up with all the time. So that's why I've written them down. I want them to be thinking of more unusual words because they've got more of a chance of getting 0 points. So again, hope that makes sense. Really, really good one. Really great at the end of a topic if you're doing some revision of key vocabulary items, or even once you've done a few topics and you can test students and practice a few different topic vocabulary and have a few different rounds. And again, I think it's a good one that's good for students right from beginners right through to more advanced. Okay, next idea, fast poems. This is thanks to @Sarita86, formerly of Twitter, and this was in a webinar that I watched for @Prince Helen. This was quite a while ago. This was a couple of years ago, and I did check on X, and I'm not sure that the handles are quite the same. So yeah, apologies about that. I'm not sure that the credits are completely accurate. So again, if anybody knows who that is, that they can let me know so that I can update that. But these are fast poems. So really great, again, when you're practicing a specific topic. It's very simple. You give students the instructions. They need to come up with 1 noun on the topic, 2 adjectives, 3 adverbs, and 4 verbs. So here are a couple of examples that I came up with. So the German example, the noun is skiing, the adjectives, exciting and quick. The adverbs are winter, annually, in the Alps, and the verbs are racing, relaxing, eating, and drinking. And then I did another one, which was on school subjects. So the subject is Spanish, interesting and fun, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. Listen, speak, read, and write. So it's just nice. It's a good for a starter activity, perhaps, or a plenary activity when you've been working on a topic. Get students just to think a little bit more creatively and encouraging them to think of different types of vocabulary and different categories of vocabulary. Okay, verb races. So this is a grammar activity. Again, another one of my favourites. It's a bit of a crazy one. So I tend to do this with the present tense. I think it could be done in any tense really, but I guess with the present tense where you're conjugating different endings, I think this would probably work well in all languages really, so with German, French and Spanish. So once we've practiced the present tense and practice all of the different conjugations, I will put students in groups, again 3 or 4, 3 is the ideal I think for this, because you can have 1 runner, 1 writer and 1 checker. They're in groups with a whiteboard. You put an infinitive verb on the board, and students then quickly write down all of the conjugations of that verb. You place yourself somewhere in that classroom. So the runner then takes the whiteboard. The first one to get to you with accurately conjugated verbs wins a point for their team. And I place myself in different places. So I'll put a different verb up on the board every time, and I will place myself somewhere different so that it's fair for the groups that are in different places in the classroom. Now, another disclaimer with this one. Obviously, this is a very active learning type game, so you do need to risk assess the environment. You need to make sure that the classroom is safe. So I always have a walk around and make sure all the bags have been tucked under the tables and that all chairs have been put in. And I do make it very, very clear of my expectations with this game that they're not, although it's called a verb race, they're not racing to me. They might want to walk quickly, but they're not running. We don't have running in the classroom. So they walk quickly. And I say, if you know you're not going to get to me before somebody else, don't race for it. Just slowly come up after them because they might have got it wrong. So I do really make my expectations clear with that. And my students know that, any sort of sign of it becoming quite dangerous and them running around, we will stop the game and we won't play it again. And I've never had a problem with it. Again, if you have the possibility of doing this, depending on your school policy, if you are able to take students outside, I've taken students up to the tennis courts to do this before. It's a lot easier because you've got a lot more space. But it's a really good way of making grammar learning fun, I think, and they really like it and they get used to that rote learning without just sitting and writing in their books. They are rote learning, they're just doing it in a slightly more fun way. And you can change the role of each person in the group. So somebody could start as being a writer, then they could become the runner, and then the checker, etc. Okay, fairly simple one, something that I'm sure you've done before. Just simply writing the start of a sentence on the board. Get students, they can do this individually or in pairs, to add to it and try to write the longest. Probably the variation, the thing that I do the most with this is that I will write a sentence on the board, underline certain elements of that sentence or certain words in that sentence, and then I want my students to try to come up with the most unique variation. So for example, at the moment with my year 10 class who are doing their GCSE exams, so 14, 15-year-olds, I'm trying to encourage them to use a variety of opinions and opinion phrases. They rely quite heavily on the phrase ich finde es in German, so I find it, and I'm trying to encourage them to come up with things like in my opinion, I must admit that, I believe that, and try to use more complex phrases. In German, it does funny things to the sentence and sends the words to the end and things like that. So I'm trying to encourage them to do that. So what I would probably do is put a simple sentence on the board like, I find it interesting and fun. And I would underline I find it, and I would underline interesting and fun, and try to encourage them to come up with more interesting vocabulary, so more interesting opinion phrase and more interesting adjectives, because they tend to over rely on things like interesting and fun and boring. I'm sure you experience that as well. Okay, another game this time. This is Who Dares Wins. Another whiteboard game, quite similar to the pointless game, just slightly different. Involves a little bit more risk, I think, this one. So again, students in pairs or small groups with a whiteboard, put a topic on the board, and students have to guess how many words they can write on that topic in a given time. So again, they don't need long, couple of minutes, there's usually plenty. So for example, if the topic was school subjects, you might have one group who decide as a group that they can come up with 5 school subjects. Another group might say they can come up with 8 school subjects. Another group might be able to come up with 14 or 15, and they write their number on the corner of the whiteboard. You then set the timer and they have that time to come up with that many words in the target language. At the end, if they've managed to get that number, they keep those points. If they haven't managed it, then they lose all of their points. So it's quite good to really get them to think about how much they know on that topic. So for example, if that group with 5 has managed to come up with 5 school subjects in the time limit, great, tick, they've got their 5 points. But if the group with 8 have only managed to come up with 6, they're going to lose all of their points. So again, really great idea and a great thing that works, I think, for vocabulary retrieval. Another game, most of them are games. This is thanks to lovely Danielle Warren, who is at Morgan MFL. She has a fantastic book. I'm going to really embarrass myself and get the title wrong, but it's along the lines of outstanding ideas for MFL teachers. And this is one of her ideas in her book. There are various different variations, and some of you probably played the Splat the Board game. It's very, very similar. It just involves all students. So they have a worksheet, or in this case, it tends to be more a list of words. They can be in English or in the target language. It's up to you which skill you prefer in terms of the translation. A different coloured highlighter each. Teacher says a word either in the target language or in English, whichever one you practice in, and students have to then battle to be the first one to highlight the word. And the winner is the one who, once you've done loads and loads of different words, who's highlighted the most on their sheet. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, obviously, I don't have loads of different highlighters for all the students, and they don't really have their own. So you could do this as a fastest finger first activity. So I did this recently with clothes. So I had a sheet with loads of different items of clothing. I would say that item of clothing in German, and the first student to point to the correct item of clothing kept a little tally and got the point. Another really easy way of doing this is actually getting them to tick the picture or tick the word. And if they've got a different colour, so our students have got, as well as their own pen, they've got a red pen as well, which they use for sort of reacting to feedback. So you could have one doing it in black or blue, one doing it in red. And again, first one to tick it wins the point, and the one who's got the most ticks at the end of it wins overall. Okay, this is very specific. This is just counting. This is just for numbers. I just find this a really good settling activity. It's a fun challenge. I've called this Don't All Count at Once. Very good if you've had quite an active lesson, done lots of speaking, they're all a little bit hyped up, and you're thinking, I do not want to send my students off in this kind of mindset to the next teacher. We need to calm things down a little bit. So they get their heads down on the table, and the idea is that as a class, we need to count from 1 to 10 consecutively in the target language. So I would always start with 1. So I'm sat here, students have all got their heads on the desk so they can't see each other. And I will start with 1, and then another student would shout out 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Sounds easy. The problem is, because they can't see each other, because they've got their eyes closed or they can't see, they all tend to shout the same number at the same time, which can't happen. It's got to be a different student. So I will start with 1. You tend to find straight away about 5 of them go 2, and I'm like, nope, we've got to start again. And I'm like, you're going to have to be more patient. You're going to have to wait a little bit longer. 1, 2. Then you might have 2 that say 3. And it can take a little while. It can take a while. There's been some times where we've been doing this for 5-10 minutes and we've not got to 10, and they've wanted to try it again the next lesson. But it's a really nice, just a nice settling activity. Obviously, it's great if you've just been learning the numbers 1 to 10, but I think it's just a great settling activity, just really at the end of any lesson, really. And you could start at a higher number if you wanted to, if you were practicing higher numbers. It's probably just a little bit more of a mouthful to get out when you're trying to do this challenge. So I do tend to prefer this as just doing 1 to 10 really. So I really hope that these are clear. As I say, it's really hard explaining them when I'm so used to actually doing these in my class with my students. So please do let me know if you need anything repeating. So a couple of variations on bingo or lotto. I'm sure you've come up with these before, used these before, just as little reminders really. So I think certainly strip bingo is a good one because it involves all students. So they fold a piece of A4 paper into 8 strips. The teacher has a list of words on the board. They write 1 word on each strip mixed up. And I would encourage them to make sure they write it in a different order, otherwise they're all going to win at the same time. So I would say a word or a sentence, and if that translation is at the top or at the bottom of their strip, they can rip it off. And the winner is the first one to have managed to rip all 8 separate pieces of paper. And I like strip bingo because you have to repeat the same phrases. So you might have said, you know, I eat pizza, yes, a pizza, and at one point that might have been at the top of a student's and they've ripped it off, but other students may have that in the middle. So you're going to have to keep repeating it until they've got to the stage where they can, you know, rip it off further down. So I quite like that because they're not just hearing the phrases or the words once. And then stand-up bingo, students can choose usually 2 words from the list, write them down secretly. They all stand up, and if the word is said or the phrase is said, they cross it off. Once they've crossed off both, they sit down, and the winner is the person still standing. I think the slight problem with that one is you tend to have a few students with nothing to do. So you might need to think about giving them an activity to do while they're waiting, but it's not too bad. I don't find it's a game that takes too long. So it's not too much of a problem if students are out and haven't really got anything to do, but it's just something to consider. Okay, the next one is run to the board. Again, I use that word run very loosely. They don't run. But what I do is I split my whiteboard into A and B. It's really easy, line down the middle, A one side, B one side. And I split the class down the middle, corresponding to the side of the board. And I give a student on either side a whiteboard pen. And then I set a timer. This is usually only a minute, 2 minutes, not very long. Give them a topic. So it's a really good one with things like food and drink or free time activities where they've got lots of vocabulary or they've practiced lots of vocabulary. And the student on each side goes up to their side of the board and they write 1 word on their list related to the topic. Now they can only write 1 word each, then they have to go to another student on their side of the classroom in their team, pass on the whiteboard, they come up, they write another word. I do allow them that they can write their word and they can also correct the spelling of any other words if they want to, because spelling and accuracy is really important with this game. They can steal a word from the other side. So if they can't think of something and they can see the other side put the word obst, fruit, and they don't know that, they can steal that if they want to. I do let them do that. But I always say to them, you're not going to win by stealing each other's ideas. So try to come up with different ones. So they keep doing that. Again, they don't run to the board, they walk quickly, but the idea is how many can they write down as a team within 1 to 2 minutes. And the winner is the team at the end who has the most correctly spelt words at the end. So in German, when you have nouns, you have to have a capital letter at the beginning. So that's one that always catches them out because they think they've written it properly and they might have a missing capital letter, for example. So it's a cross, and I circle all the ones that are correct and we see who wins. So it's a really nice active learning activity. I sometimes start a lesson with it. Again, depends on your group. If they can cope with active learning from the start and then you can bring them back down, it's a good one. Otherwise, you might want to do this later on in the lesson. So this is a good one for encouraging students to add more complexity to their sentences and writing sentences with a bit more detail. And this is thanks to Vincent Everett on X. Again, if you don't follow Vincent, please do. He shares some really great ideas that, again, are just on a whiteboard. He takes screenshots, takes photos of his whiteboard, and it's just great to see a teacher who's just kind of feeding off the class and writing ideas on the board. And I really, really like that. That's very much my style. So that's great. So it's a really good visual way of encouraging students to write longer, more extended sentences. They draw a diagonal line on a whiteboard. I let them draw little pictures of a ski slope as well if they want to, make them a bit creative. But they write part of a sentence on each line, extending the sentence more and more as they go. So on this example, we were doing the topic of environment. This student starts with the pronoun I, and then I save water, and they work all the way down until by the end of it, they're saying, I save water fairly often because it's very good for the environment and environmental protection is very important. So they have kind of done 2 sentences, but it's just showing that, we can develop something more than just saying I save water. Let's try to develop that further. And these are the steps to be able to do that. This is another vocabulary core game or a translation game, or it can be a question and answer type activity. I call this Stop the Bus, but I think a lot would call it the grid game. And Stop the Bus is something else for a lot of people. I call this Stop the Bus because I actually like to draw a bus on the board with 6 seats. And I tell students that they've got to try and get a seat on my bus. So I set a timer, again, probably a little bit longer, maybe 3 minutes for this. And I'll ask students for translations of words or phrases. And if they get it correct, they get a space on one of my seats on my bus. So I would put their initials in number 1, number 2, number 3. Once all spaces are filled up, we continue to play the game, but they can then basically knock somebody out, take somebody off the bus and take their seat. And it gets very competitive and heated, this game. They have a lot of fun with it. So again, exercise a little bit of caution. The groups that will do this sensibly and nicely and kindly. There are some groups where I've played this game and it's felt like some students have been a bit targeted. So a variation that I came up with this was that I have a dice. So once we've filled up the 6 spaces, I continue to ask for translations. A student will give me the translation, I'll roll a dice. And if it's a 5, they take the person's seat that's in 5. So it's a much fairer way of doing it. It's a little less harsh than where students get to knock each other out of their seats. However, that original version is a lot of fun and they do like that. But again, the groups that can probably cope with that better than others. Okay, I think I say this for absolutely everyone, but this is another one of my favorites, flashcard frenzy. I do this for the topic of pets, but it could be any topic. I think this would work well with things like food and drink. Again, sports and free time activities, I think it would work really well as well. Students fold a piece of A4 paper, so they have 8 spaces. You then say a word in the target language and begin a 10-second countdown. So I actually say a whole sentence. So I would say in German something like, Ich habe eine Katze, I have a cat, and I'd start saying 9, 8, 7. And it gets a bit pressured because they've got 10 seconds to draw a picture of a cat in their one tiny little space. And of course, in 10 seconds, you cannot draw a good picture of an animal. And that's the point. It's a lot of fun. It gets crazy. They can't draw anything very well. Often I'll say to them, think about something that represents that animal. So if I say, Ich habe einen Hund, I have a dog, some of them will draw a bone, for example. And they love it. It's very fast paced. We have a real giggle. Once they finish, they can cut up their 8 little flashcards. And then I will do an activity where I will say the sentences again. So I'd say, Ich habe eine Katze, I have a cat. And they'll all hold up their little picture of cats and I'll have a walk around and a giggle at all their pictures. And what they can do then in partners is they can play the game together. So their partner can say, Ich habe eine Katze, and their partner can hold up a picture of a cat, and it can just practice that key vocabulary. But yeah, it's just another fun game. I really like this one. Okay, swapsies. I'm going to be honest, I've included this one. It's not one I've played a lot of, so you may be able to explain this one much better than I can. I think it's got another name for it as well. I call it swapsies. It's a Kagan-inspired activity whereby students write a sentence in the target language on a post-it note or a piece of paper or card, or a little flashcard or something. And I think the ideal normally is that you would have a list of target language sentences on the board. Again, preferably probably pre-planned with this one, but you could come up with it on the spot. And then students choose one of those sentences and they write it on a post-it note and they write the English translation on the back. I think this works if you have maybe 3, so they could do 3 cards each or 3 post-it notes each. Not 100% sure the best way of doing this. But what they then do is they walk around, they find a partner, they show the English translation to their partner. That partner then translates it into the target language. They check it. Then they swap. If they both get it right, they can swap cards and continue and do it with the new word, with the new sentence. If they get it wrong, they keep their original card and go and find somebody else. And it's good just for practice translation, bit of speaking practice, pronunciation practice. Again, not something that I've done a lot. I know it's really popular, this game. Not something I've done a lot of, but it is another good one really that doesn't need a lot of pre-planning. So I'm sure somebody can probably explain that one a little bit better than I can. Another competitive game which you can do where you split the class down the middle. You give students on either side a number, so that on each side, there's a number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. If you've got an odd number, then there may be one student that will need to have 2 numbers. But you would say a sentence or a word that you want the students to translate. Again, doesn't matter whether you say the English and they do the target language or vice versa. So if I were to do, again, I'll use the topic of food. If I said pommes, and then I might say nummer 5, whichever student is number 5 would bob up and say chips, and bob back down, and then I would give a point to their team. So they can stand up if they want to, or sometimes they just stay in their seats and it's the first one to shout out the answer. So again, gets them all listening, gets them all engaged. Just a nice activity maybe for the end when you've got 5 minutes and you want to just revise some of the vocabulary or some of the sentences that you've been working on in the lesson. I think it could work for grammar as well. You could ask some grammar questions and get students to give the conjugation or something, and they're competing against each other. Okay, lesson lift off. So I'm sure many of you do lots of retrieval. We do a retrieval starter at the end of at the start of every lesson, which is to retrieve something from the previous lesson or even previous terms as well. And again, I don't remember who this is something I got off a PowerPoint with lots of starter templates on, and I don't remember where I got it from. It was one I've had for a little while, but I really like it. So obviously 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Usually I might have something like, give me 5 positive adjectives, 4 negative adjectives. Can you give me 3 time phrases? Can you give me 2 future tense sentences on this topic? Can you give me 1 past tense on this topic? And it's just a nice, slightly more interesting, I guess, way of doing a retrieval starter. Okay, this is a popular one, I'm sure lots of you have done this, but I put it in there because I thought it would be a really good sort of reminder if you've not played this for a while. I always play this with colours because I just find it easier, but you can again do it with any pictures on the board. And the idea here is that it's good for choral repetition. You're getting students to practice the pronunciation of the vocabulary, but every now and again you say the wrong word. So you point to each word on the whiteboard. So again, you may have this pre-planned, or you may just stick some words up, which is fine. You could write the words up on the board and they then do the translation. I think that's probably a little bit more confusing. So I think with this one, it's probably better to have something pre-planned, but it doesn't take too long, I don't think. So I would say, in German, so rot, blau, grün, I don't know if that's rosa or lila, I'm not sure what colour, gelb. And I keep going through that, but every now and again I would point to one. So if I pointed to rot there and I'd said blau, if students repeated and said blau, I get the point. If they ignore what I said and all shout rot, then they get the point on their team. And I always say, if I can hear one person getting it wrong, then I'm getting the point. And they get quite good at this, actually, I find. I never, ever win this game. They get far too focused on this and always beat me. But yeah, really good fun game. This is another one that does require a little bit more planning, but it's something that I've used for years. It's the same PowerPoint I use time and time again. Brain gym. Really gets students thinking. Again, I think it probably works best for colours, but I use it just sometimes as a warm-up activity. I don't always use it just because I'm teaching colours. If I, certainly in the morning, if you're wanting to get students thinking a little bit, it's quite good just to run through this little brain gym activity with them. So I will write the word. So again, if we're doing like rot, it would be R-A-T, and then it would be in red, and then it might have blau, B-L-A-U, in blue. and keep going. But every now and again, I will have a colour. Say I would have the word blau, which is the word blue, but I would have had it in green writing. And the students have to say the colour, not the word. So it really, really messes up their brain. So if they've got the word blau, but actually the word has been written in green, they need to say grün. So you sort of can whiz through the PowerPoints and they need to say the colour, not the word. And it really, really sends them a bit crazy. It really does. It's a really good one. But again, we run through it a few times. And by the end of it, they've worked it out and they've managed to do it. And it really gets things, really gets them thinking in the morning. So this is the game that I believe many people would call Stop the Bus. I had a colleague play this the other day and she calls it Spot the Bus. I call it spaghetti ice, which is spaghetti ice cream, which is a German speciality, which is ice cream that looks like spaghetti. It's strawberry and vanilla ice cream. Real cultural thing as well that we can talk about. So you can call it any name. You can come up with a name because this is what the students have to shout out when they manage to achieve this. So it's a categories game. It's probably more for older students or those who can very quickly use a dictionary, but maybe it probably doesn't have to be. You put some categories or topics on the board, give students a letter, split them into groups, into small groups, 2s or 3s, and see who can find a word for each topic beginning with that letter. And you don't need a timer, it's just the first group to come up with a word for each one of those topics. And when they think they've got them all, they can shout out their silly word. So in my sense, it would be spaghetti ice, and the winner would be those that have managed to get all of the words for that category. Again, you could come up with a different word in a different language. Okay, I think hopefully I'm doing all right. I think this is my last slide, so hopefully I'm doing all right for time here. I knew I'd speak a lot quicker than when I practiced it earlier today. So here are a few slightly more creative ideas. A couple of them don't require any pre-planning. A couple of them do require a little bit more planning, but it's something that you can use time and time again. So when I do, we do about our dream house, so it encourages students to use the conditional tense or subjunctive. I get them to make little origami houses, and you can YouTube origami houses quite easily, so that it can take students a little while to get their head around this. I do have to go around and help them sometimes, but they create a little house and they can actually design a little house that opens up, and then inside they can write their little text about their dream house in the target language and in the conditional tense or whatever tense you decide to use. And I think it just makes writing a little bit more interesting when they can do it more creatively. It's a really nice display idea as well, I think. Another idea are, I don't know if I can pronounce these correctly, trioramas. Again, you can Google how to do these, but they make like a little, it's almost like a little pop-up, little bit of paper where they can draw sort of the skyline of a city. So some students have like printed off like a little skyline of Berlin that they've put on there, or they've hand drawn it, and then they can write about their town on the flat bit. So again, just looks quite nice if you've got like a windowsill or something where you can display them. It just looks a little bit more interesting than just writing in their books. And then the star game. So I have created 2 sets of 12 cards. You could just, I have mine are laminated, but you could just cut them out of cards. I guess if you're in a bit of a rush, you just cut them out of paper. It doesn't really matter. And I stick them on in blue tack on the board. And on the back of these cards, I have maybe 2 or 3 zeros. I have 2 or 3 stars, and then the rest I just have a Q for a question. So again, split the group into 2. A student would ask for a number in the target language. So let's say 4, number 4, and I'd turn it over. If it said Q, they would get asked a question based on something in that lesson. So it's usually good for a plenary activity at the end. So it might be a translation, or it might be a question that they've got. I might give them the question in the target language and they need to answer in the target language. And if they get that right, they get a point for their team. If they get a 0 on the back of their card, no question, but they lose all of their points. There's a common theme, I think, with some of these where there's lots of losing points. And if they get a star on the back of their card, they get an automatic 5 points and no question. So they really like it. It's quite exciting to see what's going to be on the back of the card. Obviously, the majority of them are going to be Qs because you want them to answer some questions. But every now and again, if you throw in a 0 and a star, then it just mixes it up and makes it a little bit more fun, a little bit more interesting. And I do have 2 sets because obviously students start to work out which number is behind which one. And I'm sure if you're very clever with macros and fancy things like that, you could even do this on a PowerPoint. That's way out of my capabilities. So not something that I could do. I like to have the physical cards and I just carry them around in my little sort of lesson pack. And then the final activity, which I do more as a cultural activity, being a German teacher, unfortunately, I tend to find that some students in year 7 don't know where to find Germany on a map. I've done this with Austria and Switzerland as well. So I've got some little laminated Germany flags, probably 5 or 6 with a little bit of blue tack. I put a map of Germany on my whiteboard, and students come and stick on the map of, sorry, did I say map of Germany? Map of Europe, sorry. Map of Europe, where they think Germany is, and obviously the winner who gets the closest. Usually there's a 1 or 2 students who do know where Germany is, and they can get a house point. And then on the next slide, I have some tiny little Reichstag, so the government building in Germany, some little laminated pictures, and they have to find Berlin. So, you know, I put up a map of Germany, and they come and take it in turns to stick up their little picture of the Reichstag to try to find Berlin. So it's just good at the beginning just to kind of sort of do a little bit of the geographical context. You know, it's no good sort of teaching the language if they don't really know where in the world Germany is, or Austria or Switzerland. So it's just quite a nice cultural activity to do. I've done it on transition days as well, where we've had the primary school students come up for the day. If they've had a taster for German, then we'll play this as well, and they quite enjoy it. And it's just getting them up and moving. I love active learning. I love getting students involved, and it just worked quite well, I think. Right, I believe that I have, whizzed through that in that record time. And I think it's back over to Caitlin for Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Claire. I just put in the chat for everyone to type any questions that they have, but I know there was one question that came up a little bit earlier, Claire. If I could have you go back to, I'm not sure exactly which slide it was, but one of the games that involved running, and there was 3 roles where it was the runner, the writer, and the checker.
Verb races, I think, probably. Let me.
Okay. Yeah, they were asking about, the roles again for each student and what they would do.
Okay, yeah. So this works. I think groups of 3 work best for this. You may have to have 4. So you will have 1 runner, 1 writer, and 1 checker. And I would suggest changing it each time. So when I put the verb up on the board, the infinitive verb, the student will then, they'll have one that will write it down as quick as they can. And then you can see the runner is desperate to go. I'll make sure they sit down, no standing up until they're ready to go. And the checker obviously they can have their book open if they want to. It's up to you how much you allow them to help. But the checker is the one looking, obviously somebody's writing so frantically, that checker is like, are we getting the endings right here? Am I spelling the word right? We have some really dodgy spellings of some of these German words. Schreiben, for example, to write. They're usually getting the I and the E the wrong way around. So you've got that checker doing that. And then as soon as that person has finished writing, the other student who's the runner will then come and bring it to me. And the idea really is that they should change every time. What tends to happen is you've got probably one student who's very, very quick at writing, one student who's always desperate to do the running, and one who just is quite happy to sit there and kind of watch a little bit. But I do really try to encourage them to swap roles. And I sort of say to them, well, you'll lose your points, or I won't accept it if I know that it's the same person coming and running to me every time. So yeah, hopefully that explains that a little bit better.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Claire. Yeah, I think the question was mainly about what the checker does. So that's perfect to know if they're
Yeah,
using it against other resources to check.
yeah, I suppose that's up to you really. I'm not sure. I don't always get them to. It's more because I want them to actually start producing it from memory. So by this point, usually we've done lots and lots of practice anyway with whiteboards, and they've done lots of, activities in their exercise book. So I would like to think that usually by this stage they should be able to just sit and check it. But obviously, if you're doing this a little bit earlier in the learning process, you may want to allow them use of resources, which is fine.
Oh, perfect.
Having a
That
read
makes
through the
sense.
chat. I'm saying hello to people. Hi, Kate. Thanks for coming. That's really
Yeah,
nice to see people.
you'll see through the chat a lot of different people saying thank you for all the ideas, and, I liked Sam's comment about, he loves pointless, but I've never done it in pairs and small groups. Great way to speed things up and get them working collaboratively. Very
Mhm.
nice.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's I think with a lot of these activities, it's sort of just having the confidence to try it out, really, isn't it? And I think I know obviously I work a lot with student teachers at the moment, and there's a tendency, and again, I completely get it, our curriculum maps now are so jam-packed full of things that we need to get through every lesson and move on really quickly that sometimes you daren't try something new because you haven't got the time. You haven't got the time for things going wrong. And I know my advice always to student teachers is just take a bit of a risk, have a bit of fun. I think as a teacher, if we can just relax a little bit and be prepared to make mistakes. I'll say, right, we're going to have a go at this game. I'm not 100% how it's going to work, but I think we're going to have a go at it. You're my little guinea pig class. Let's see if it works. Give me some feedback. Have you enjoyed it? So I think it's just try them out and see if it works for you. And hopefully, as I say, they're not massively original ideas, but they're things that I think we get so bogged down with our textbooks and our GCSE specs and so much that we get through that I think sometimes we forget to have fun. And I am very guilty of this. And I think it's just nice sometimes to just have 5 minutes where you have that time building those relationships with your students, doing something a bit fun, but hopefully they're learning something at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I was teaching, game days were always their favorite. And they
Yes.
would ask me, "Can we play a game every Friday?"
I know,
So
it's interesting. Yeah, I was just seeing Amanda say it might help my demotivated, tired year 11 class. I mean, yeah, I think a lot of these ideas, I think, gosh, I do them with year 7, I do them with year 8. But, year 11, yeah, I think they probably need one of these for 5 minutes at the end of, all the revision that you're doing. And my sixth formers as well. They still love a game. They really do.
yeah, absolutely. Perfect. Well, I think more of the praise for the presentation is still coming through, so you can read through the comments, Claire.
Oh, thank
There's a
you.
question at the end about will your slides be available? So we'll be sharing the recording, which will include the slides there. And again, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Claire for the insightful presentation. We can see from all the comments coming in, everybody enjoyed it. We really appreciate your time and expertise.
No,
Before we, oh yeah,
No, I was just going to say, I say some people I'm just reading saying that, feeling tired at the end of term. And I guess that's what I hope with these is that you can literally just, think of them and put them into practice the following day or after the holidays. And so hopefully that's just kind of rejuvenated very tired teachers at this stage of the year.
absolutely, yeah, definitely. And before we wrap up our session, we do want to say that we'd love to hear your thoughts, your takeaways, your learning points. So if you want to share any of your takeaways on your preferred social media channels, you can find us on all social media links. We're on X, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn at thisisschool.com. And for those that are interested in learning a little bit more about us, about This Is School, and using us as part of your teaching toolkit, and also we offer a free trial. You can visit our website, thisisschool.com, to request one of those trials. A great thing to start when you come back from break. And one final reminder as well is that this webinar series isn't over yet. Claire is with us on Thursday, the 25th of April,
Yep.
with a session on speaking in the MFL classroom. So do make sure to sign up for that. Please join us again. And we want to say thank you all for being a part of today's webinar. We really look forward to seeing you in future sessions and hope that you have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you.